Hey, it's Joe West from the West Barn with
Mike Shimshack.
Today we've got Brent Maher on the program. He is Nashville royalty. He is a hat trick creator, meaning he has had great success, legendary success, both as a record producer, an audio engineer, and a songwriter. A true rarity. He's got 6 Grammy Award-winning records to his credit as a producer, over 20 number one singles, and a wide array of platinum and multi-platinum albums. Artists including The Judds, who he discovered and developed, Jody Messina, Dottie West, Bobby Darin, Tina Turner, Johnny Reed, plus much more. The Judds had over 10 multi-platinum records or platinum records. He's also worked with friend of the show and guest, Joe Robinson. He's currently doing some work with him. As a songwriter, his credits include numerous number one singles, as well as 30 awards by ASCAP and SOCAN and NSAI. These are awards for hit songs that have made it to a certain level on the charts. He's also got Song of the Year via the ACM Awards for The Judds, Why Not Me? As an engineer, I'm going to go through this. It's going to take a second, but I think it's worthwhile. I don't want to just like pour through a bunch of credits, but when I was looking through these credits, there was just none that I wanted to leave out. So Roy Orbison, Tina Turner, proud Mary for Tina Turner, Ike Tina Turner, Roy Orbison, Diana Ross and the Supremes, The Faces, Duke Ellington, Ray Charles, Jimmy Buffett, Fats Domino, Glenn Campbell, Dolly Parton, Chuck Berry, Sammy Davis Jr., Gladys Knight, Merle Haggard, Willie Nelson, and Elvis's last single. He's also inducted into the Audio Engineering Society's Hall of Fame in 2017, as well as the Country Music Hall of Fame in 2019. True legendary status. We're glad to have him on the program, and we're excited to talk to him. Welcome to the show, Mr. Brent Maher.
I'm glad to be here, guys, and I'm glad you're doing this. It's great to get some behind-the-scene characters out there to tell a few stories about how things are done.
Yeah, well, you will find that there is lots of behind-the-scene characters. What we lack is perspective. Mm-hmm. We don't really get to see our counterparts. So if I'm a record producer or I'm an engineer, I don't really get to hang with a lot of engineers because there's usually only one of us in the room. So all of our audience get to sit here and watch. And me and Mike have had the great honor of like getting to actually talk to guys that do what we do and seeing what we're doing right or what we're doing similarly, right? And just getting to see what is common, the common trait through all these successful people. You've had an insane career of success. You also have a music publishing company called Moraine Music, right? Moraine?
Right. Mm-hmm.
And a recording. You have a record company?
No. Well, you know, nowadays practically everybody has a record company, because you discover somebody you want to work with, and you can cut some sides. You can establish an imprint and you throw it up there to the ether and see if anybody cares and get some excitement going. So, yeah, we do releases like that, but we don't really consider ourselves a full-blown record company.
You would seem like you would need a record company. With the publishing company, you guys do a lot in sync and film work, as well as getting cuts on records. And probably manages quite a bit of the work you need to do. You're probably looking through that catalog for things to cut on artists you're working for, and or you're making records for artists that are signed to the publishing company. I know there was Gareth from, is he from Ireland, Gareth?
Oh, yeah. Gareth Dunlop.
Real talented guy.
Unbelievable singer.
Yeah.
Song and guitar player.
And a great pairing for you. What I really thought we could do a deeper dive on today with you is that we were talking just before the program. I was telling Brent that, I listened to his records and they just sound so amazing. And he's got such a holistic approach, like as if you're a listener's approach, but everything sounds so beautiful and gorgeous. Rather than putting 20 mics on a drum kit, he may decide to put 2 or 3 or 4, he might put a minimal amount. But to me, when I listen to those drum mics together in the way you're making these records, I always say, man, all these plugins, all these mic pre's, all these microphones, all these techniques. And at the end of the day, I like what I'm hearing from what would be considered a more holistic, simpler approach. But it just seems to serve the kind of records you do. And they're gorgeous. So we were hoping you'd maybe tell us a little bit about that. I know you've got a lot of history with a lot of legendary artists, but, we're hoping to really pick your brain today about like what the way you see music and decide to record it. Tell us a little bit about like what a normal session might look like. I think you had a story about the Proud Mary for Ike and Tina whenever you
Yeah.
had done the conception, how you were going to make that record. Can you tell us a little bit about that, and then we'll dig a little deeper?
Yeah. God, this is so many years ago. But anyway, when I saw him in the studio, when I was at United Recording in Las Vegas, by the way. Like, I started my career here in Nashville when I got out of the Air Force, and I worked for Fred Foster Recording, which was Monument Records. And Bill Porter, who was the chief engineer there, gave me my first job. And it was just, I mean, it was such an amazing opportunity, because Bill Porter, as you guys probably know, is maybe one of the most legendary engineers to ever make a record in Nashville, you know? So anyway, Bill ups after I've been working here for 3 years, moves out to Las Vegas, and he buys United Recording in Las Vegas, which was a sister studio to United Western in LA and also in Chicago. And so Bill Putman, you know, built that studio, built the console that we had. I mean, it was all UA stuff. And so I joined Bill out there and worked with Bill for 7 years out in Las Vegas. And so that's where my resume with Ellington and Ike and Tina, oh my gosh, a lot of the Motown artists you mentioned, Sly Stone's first album, Dance to the Music, we cut in that studio. Other than Dance to the Music, that was cut in LA. Everything else was cut at United there. So that's where a lot of those names on my resume came from. And Ike and Tina was one of them. So I look at the studio book one day and I see that Ike and Tina is on for next week, and that Ike is going to come in the afternoon and just check out the studio, you know, the day before. So, you know, he shows up and, you know, nice as can be. And we walk around the studio and he seems to dig everything, you know, and he said, well, maybe it would be good for you to come and see the show tonight. What do you think? And I said, yeah. He said, well, you know, you want to bring your wife? And I said, oh yeah, that'd be great. So anyway, we go that evening and we watch, they were playing at the International Hotel, and we go there, and I mean, the show is paralyzing. I mean, the energy level coming off that stage when they ended the set, people couldn't breathe. You know, I mean, you couldn't find a breath in that room. It was just all sucked up. And then all of a sudden the room just explodes, you know, with clapper and clapping, everybody going crazy. And I'm saying to myself, I mean, it was exhilarating and fun. And then I almost had a panic attack of like saying, how am I going to capture this? How, in God's name, am I going to make this happen at United Recording? And I couldn't sleep that night. And I woke up the next morning and I said, you know what? Because I had told Ike the day before how I normally would set the studio. Well, you put the drums over here and we'll put the bass here, and, you know, B3 is over here, and, you know, with his horns and A baby over there and blah, blah, blah. And he said, oh, that's cool, man. You know, that's cool. We're cool. Well, anyway, I went in that morning and I said, you know what, man? I am setting this studio up exactly the way they perform on stage. Exactly. I'm going to have drums here. Ike's amp is almost dead in front of the kick drum to the right just a little bit. I mean, I had the whole thing pictured in my mind. The bass dude's over here with his monstrous stack and big old custom stack, you know, and the horns are just right next to him and blah, blah, blah. And here's Tina right in front. And the only thing I did different with Tina, I just reversed it. I put her facing the band to get, you know, as much mic rejection as I could, because it was all done live.
Oh, wow.
And so anyway, yeah, the only thing that wasn't done live on that was the background singers, the Ikettes. And we put them on the next day. But so anyway, Ike comes in, you know, the following day, and he looks at the setup, and, you know, the guys he got there a little bit ahead of him, and they got the drum set up, and he looks at me and he says, hey man, he said, what's this? I said, well, you know, Ike, I think it's how you guys play every night. He says, so we can make a record like we play? And I said, sure. And of course I'd never done that. And I said, yeah, sure. Yeah, that's what we should do. And he said, cool, man. And so Tina comes in and says, this is it. I said, yeah, oh yeah, it'd be great. And I just said, oh my God, let this work. So anyway, it did work. I recorded 2.5 albums with him, and every single album we cut that way.
Oh, wow.
And anyway, what that set in me is the absolute foremost thing that a producer or an engineer has to establish in a studio. First and foremost is the artist's comfort level. It can't be your comfort level. It can't be, oh, this is the way I set the drums up, or this is the way, we always have the horns over here, or we always have to have perfect isolation on this over here, blah, blah, blah. The thing is, you got to have your artist in the absolute most comfortable place they can be to create what's inside them that they want to get out. If you can accomplish that, you're halfway home.
That's incredible. Rewind, listen to the past 60 seconds. That's the kind of thing as a young engineer would have gone right over my head. And I would have been right back to, oh, this is my kick drum mic. You can't put that there. Your cymbals have to be this high. You have to do this. It has to be in this ISO booth. Rewind the last 60 seconds. That will make your career take half as long because you'll be a part of great records, right? Great outcomes. I've also noticed that with my level of anxiety, like what you were saying, like, oh my God, I hope this goes well. Yep. I've noticed that putting myself in an uncomfortable spot as an engineer, that all the compromises I thought I was making, I'm making air quotes here. Yeah. All the compromises of having Tina in the room with the drum kit, having the bass player bleeding onto the drum mics, having the guitars, all that stuff that was stressing me out as an engineer. When I pulled up the faders, almost always it was either a value add, it was better, or it did not have the negative consequences I thought it would have.
Yeah.
Isn't that something though? Like, we are dogmatic as producers and engineers that we have to control. We have to Mutt Lang the living daylights out of every record, right? Down to the 16th note. We have to, and it works for Mutt, right? Does some beautiful work. Sure. But there is a beauty in my one complaint that I've always voiced about Mutt is that it sounds like a Mutt Lang record. It may not sound like a Tina Turner record. Would I want to see Cyndi Lauper in the studio with Mutt Lang? I don't think I would. I think I want her weird. I think I want I don't want her corrected, So tell us a little bit. So that was like, you had a drum kit, you had a bass, you had guitar, bass, and drums. Did you have anything else on that? Or was it a trio?
Well, it was a keyboard, Ike playing guitar. Then he added a rhythm guitar part to it, a bass and drums. And I think he had 4 horns
in the room.
And, And that was a standard setup,
How do you do that?
It's the 3 girls, but he definitely wanted to overdub them,
So tell me about like these horns, right? And you got a B3 Leslie 120 cabinet in there, probably rocking out guitars. Yeah. They're probably at stage level, right? Would they be just like?
Well, everybody played gig level.
What are you doing to
straight out?
Tell us what are the consequences? Like when you turn up the vocals, are you hearing a lot of horns? Did you have a go-go behind her? What did you do to mitigate all this stuff?
Not a lot, oddly enough, we had some really nice gobos that I actually set behind Tina, so I wouldn't be getting anything coming back into her mic. Right. And then you have to understand that Tina Turner can cover a microphone. You follow me? Now, there are some artists that would absolutely not work for.
Yeah.
There are some artists that they just don't have the output to what I like to call cover a mic to where you could get away with that.
Yeah.
And, but with Tina, you absolutely did not have that issue.
You bring up a really good point there. So I remember making records and I was blown away with a live mic. Maybe it's an SM7, maybe it's an RE20, even a 57, that if you put a gobo behind them, the difference with the gobo behind them, you wouldn't think it'd be much, but the difference was incredible of the amount of band bleeding in. Like you would almost solo the vocal mic if you had an absorptive, if you had like you just put your bed vertically behind them, right? Any kind of absorption. I was blown away at the reduction of ambient noise. It's really an incredible thing that you can accomplish in this kind of setting.
Yeah, we had like three. I would build like a little. They were about, I'm guessing, like maybe 5 feet across, maybe 8 to 10 feet tall, something like that. And I had, like one behind her and then like two on each side.
Yeah, angled out a little bit, right? So it's like almost half a stop sign.
Yeah, and it gives the singer a little bit more of a comfort zone, like I'm in a place here, you know what I mean? Opposed to being stuck out in the middle of a room. Because it was a pretty good sized studio.
So can you tell us what the drum setup, would you have had everything mic'd, or was it just some like overheads and a thing out front? What were you doing? Do you remember?
I had one overhead, a kick mic and a snare mic. And a lot of that, and the overhead was not dead center because there's a lot of toms, like the whole groove on that. In fact, I was actually nominated for engineering the best single of the year. Oh, the other thing, Joe, that I just found out about a month ago is actually there are 7 Grammys to my credit, because Proud Mary won a Grammy for the best R&B duo or group vocal that year.
Wow.
And I did not know that. I just knew that I was nominated and I lost. I think it was a Henry Mancini record that won.
Yeah.
And I had to notice you've been nominated for it. I thought, whoa, wow. Bill was just like ecstatic about it. But
that's a pretty good part.
It was a Mancini record that won.
That's a pretty good point in your career where you can like realize, oh yeah, I was nominated for another Grammy and won another Grammy, unbeknownst to me 30, 40 years ago.
It's almost 50 years. And somebody mentioned that. And I said, no, I don't think so. He said, Brent, I saw it. And so sure enough, man, I went and I looked up Proud Mary, Ike Tina Turner. And then it says awards it won. It says, sure as heck, man, a Grammy that year for best R&B performance, duo or group. And I said, well,
incredible.
Yeah.
What overhead mic would you have used?
A 67.
67. So a tube, large diaphragm tube mic, U67.
Yeah.
And snare would have been what? Or no, you didn't have snare, did you?
No, I did have a snare.
Okay, what was it?
I did have a snare, and I would back off a little bit, never right on top the snare, but kind of back off a little bit.
What, like 10 inches?
So
what would you say?
I want to catch, the full drum, not just dead on top of the head.
Got it.
And then I had a kick mic, and that was probably a FET 47.
Wow.
And that's all I used. And I remember Ronnie Tutt. I don't know. Are you familiar with Ronnie Tutt?
He was one
of the top LA. He was one of the drummers that would be in the Wrecking Crew, and then wound up being Elvis's drummer until Elvis died. But really famous drummer. And he and I were working together one day, and he said, I can't believe that you did Proud Mary. Man, it's one of the best drum sounds I've ever heard. And I'm like, well, really? Thank you, buddy. And
that's what I'm talking about, though.
But
that's what I'm talking about. One of the best drum sounds I've ever heard, and it's 3 microphones.
Yeah.
And let's imagine now in a modern world, Proud Mary is going to be recorded. There's maybe 10 to 15 microphones in the drum kit. Then it goes into Pro Tools and a bunch of menagerie on it. All the little spots for inserts are filled up with signature plugins and boxes that you don't even know what's happening. Maybe it's a phase thing or some low end. And it's like, dude made one of the best drum sounds on record with 3 microphones, a great drummer, and most importantly, a great song and performance. People love the sounds of your records if they love the records. They will learn to love horrible sounds. Like maybe you didn't prefer this sound, like the drum sound on Dave Matthews on bam, 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 bam. There was, what was it? Crash. There's one of them that I really didn't like.
It's Marching is the one I think you just said.
But I ended up loving it after I heard it because I loved the music. There's something to that, right?
Yeah.
It's just beautiful. And what vocal mic do you think you used on her? Did you tell us?
Yeah, I think that was a 67.
A 67.
Yeah.
And do you remember was obviously to a tape machine? Do you remember what that was and through what console?
Yeah, that was by then we had updated our board. We had put in an API, and we had updated from, when I first got there, we had a 4-track. And then we went from 4 to, dig this, a homemade 8-track. When I mean homemade, Bill had got a deck and a head stack for a 1-inch machine, but no electronics. So we had that sitting there. And then next to it was a rack to where we had 8 351 mono machine electronics. You know what a 351 mono machine is? The Ampex.
Yeah,
it's the old Ampex machine you see, going back as far as you want to. It was the standard mono machine or stereo machine. That and Studers were probably considered the 2 best. And Bill had put together 8 of those babies, racked up, and that was our 8-track machine. And I'll get back to Proud Mary. That's the machine that all of the vocals, and on the Aquarius album by the Fifth Dimension, Bones Howell came in. Of course, Bones was the producer of that record. And I assisted him, because all of that record, all of the vocals in that record were cut at our studio at United. And Bones came in. Now, this is one of the top engineer producers in the world. I mean, right at the very tippy top. And when he walked in the studio, I thought that when he saw this jerry-rigged 8-track, that he would just turn around and walk out. You're like, are you kidding me? And he comes in and he looks at this thing and goes, unbelievable. He said, did you guys put this together? I said, well, Bill put it together. And he said, I can't imagine what this thing sounds like. It's got to be amazing. Because he knew. He said, Jesus, that's like, the best electronics ever. And you got 8 of these puppies lined up. And and so, on the console, that particular console, we still had our UA console. We hadn't gone to the API yet. Well, it was a 3-bus console. It was big old knobs on it,
Yeah.
So to change channels, I had to go and take the center channel and unplug it from track 1 to track 3 to track 6 to track 7. That was our channel selector. Me holding a plug and changing it in the back of the machine. That's how we switch tracks.
So
And
you mean the way you got it to tape, switching tracks?
What's that?
Like when you say 3-channel, you mean left, center, right? Or do you mean like
what? 4. The console only had 3 buses.
3 buses. So you'd move them on the back of the machine to
I would
route the
move
tape.
in the back of the machine.
Got it.
Oh, it was priceless.
Yeah.
But it did. I mean, you listen to the vocal sound on that record, on the Aquarius album, it's flawless. It's so smooth.
Isn't that,
right?
That is like, despite all the technology we have now, there is a certain magic that are on those old records, and it might be the limitations of the consoles and the electronics and the tape machine, but there is a beauty that is ungettable, seemingly ungettable these days. Although you get it. On the records I hear you doing, I listen to them and I say, man, when I hear the records you do, I think I could never do that. I wish I could, but I could never do that.
You can do it.
I would mess it up. I'd mess it up. I'd end up like making it too hyped or bringing up too much of the brightness. All the things I treasure about your recordings, I would end up like, because my sensibility is aggressive and in your face, I'd end up messing it up just because of my DNA, But I just
getting back to Proud Mary then, and that machine, that by then we had switched over and we had graduated up to the API board, which was wonderful. And then we had a 3M 16-track. Now that that was a friggin' Boss Mac Daddy machine, man. That tape down on that thing was like a tank, and so that's what that was recorded on.
And it probably had 312 pre's in it.
That I don't know.
Probably from that era. I'm thinking that's where they were. And when you're mixing, did you mix Proud Mary? I mean, I assume you did.
Yeah.
Okay, because like in the old days, it wasn't like, hey, let's go shopping for a mix engineer. It was like, hey, we're here to work today. Let's mix the song, right? And it's like,
we did everything. I recorded all the notes. I mean, everything and mixed it and everything.
Tell me what that looks like when you decide. Did it take all day? Did it take an hour? Was it a rough mix that you just? What was the mixing process like?
So that was a handful, because the full version of that song, there's like a minute of her sort of just rapping, Well, let me tell you what we do. We don't do nothing soft and easy. We do everything rough and raw, raw. And behind it, boom, 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 boom. And then Ike doing a few things once in a while. And the whole thing is just going like that. And so, you got to get that up to an appropriate level. And then when you got that to an appropriate level, then you got to have the whole band kick in. Well, then, that needs to take your head off. And of course, live, that's an easy thing to accomplish because you're not having any limitations there. But on mixing the record, it was like, man, I had to do a lot of master gain writing to where I created this illusion to where you had the comfort level-wise, when you heard Tina and the band just coasting, and then when the band really kicked in, it really just shot up to another level. And I had to do that knowing of the limitations of disc mastering, because there's only so much you can do to get on a disc. Even if you did speed, there's still only so much you can do. Whereas in digital mastering, I mean, you can just blow up cars if you want to, So that was a bit of a challenge. And I probably worked.
And that happened on the master fader, you're saying?
Yeah, the master fader.
And no automation. So you're just practicing. Would you put console labeling tape up to like have like a top level and a bottom level and mark in between?
Oh, yeah. I did all those things.
And it's just like, so you kind of knew where your bounds were, right? In the old days, we used to put console labeling tape over the bottom of the fader. So when the fader came down, it physically would hit it. So you'd know what your bottom and top were. And then it was like, okay, you would then have to just perform it over and over again until you had nailed, because you're now part of the band.
Yeah. Most of the time, all of my mixes back then, really up until the 80s, was all just live performances.
Right.
And if you had something just perfect and you screwed something up later on, then say, I'll just put a piece of leader tape in, the 2-track, and then I'll just back up and take it from there. And and so
edit it.
And then edit it and then put it together.
Yeah. Pro Tools version 0. The very first edit.
Yeah. So anyway, but with Proud Mary, I think I don't believe I did that. I think because once the band kicked in, it pretty much took care of itself, and it wasn't difficult, trying to keep Tina in that little perfect spot for her. But anyway, yeah, it was a bit of a challenge, but it's one of those records that the first time I heard it on the radio, I was like really, really happy.
Wow.
Most of the time when I ever hear my records on the radio, I kept, oh my God, it's not bright enough, or it's too slow, or the vocal's too far out, or the vocal's not. I mean, I can always find everything wrong. Anything you can do wrong on making a record, I could usually find most of those in my records. But I had 2 or 3 over the years that I was like, it's perfect.
There's a beautiful thing that happens with everybody who's finished a record and then plays it for somebody, whether that be an A&R guy or an artist. In that moment of the first playback of your record, the record you spent forever making perfect, you will hear every mistake in the first 30 seconds of playing that for someone else. It's like this insecurity, subconscious genius mixer comes out in the back of your head and points out every flaw in the record. You're
totally. You know what? Joe, I know we have a lot to cover here, but I remember one thing that how I taught myself the lesson is, good God, I was doing a Dave Loggins record, a wonderful, wonderful artist. And about 2 years after I made the record, I was working on, another project, and I was in my little music room at the house. I had all kinds of tape copies and stuff spread over the floor, and I picked up a little 7-inch reel, and it was about 6 mixes on this one particular song with Dave. And on each mix, I had a note of what was different, like 1 dB at 200 on the bass drum. And another one would be 1 dB plus on the bass drum minus 2 dB at 400 cycles on the bass drum. And then I had all these things that I had listed. And I said, well, I'll be damned. So you know what? I put, just for the heck of it, I put it on and listened to it. And I could not tell any difference from 1 to 1. And I said, my God, I remember driving myself absolutely nuts on this mix. And now I'm listening to it 3 years later, and I can't tell any difference at all.
Right.
So it was
I can't tell you how. I can't tell you how many times I've been EQing the wrong channel or the wrong plugin, or something has been bypassed, or you are EQing something and you don't have the input set up and you're listening to the mix from the night before. And I've convinced myself that I've fixed the vocal problem. And it's like, man, what am I doing with my life? I should be out paving driveways. I ought not be in the control of somebody's creative destiny.
Yeah.
So on your mix for, is it heavy-handed, or do you have 2-bus processing? Like, would you hit vocals hard? If, is that something that, like, as need be, you would maybe do something? Or are you pretty gentle in the mixing of a record like Proud Mary?
Well, yeah. And I know you want to advance beyond records I made 40 years ago plus, but oddly enough, the only compression I ever used back then, and I was just following the lead of Bill and some other, I really had some great mentoring from engineers, Joe. Oh my God, Jim Malloy. I had an opportunity to work with him for a good while. Of course, Bill Porter, Tommy Straw, Mort Thomason. I can't begin to tell you, Bones Howe, numerous wonderful engineers. Very few of them were heavy-handed with compression. It was more of control, gentle control, and mostly to do with lead vocals and things. Not a lot on instruments, and I never mixed back then with any compression, bus compression. And if there was something that was like spiking the bus or pushing something too far that you knew was going to cause trouble, then find out what that is and deal with it, but never kind of like one thing covers all. Now, nowadays I do.
You think that's a function of digital versus analog machines, maybe doing a bit of that, real extreme peak reduction for you?
Yeah, it could be. It could have been. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because we didn't, I didn't have a lot of shame as far as hitting the tape pretty hard. Mm-hmm. Especially with toms and things like that. I kind of like to crush the toms, not the bass drum and the snare so much, but toms, I kind of like to, a little bit of red never bothered me at all, or even a lot of red. Mm-hmm.
I came on the scene when it was +3, and then we quickly moved to +6, and then went to +9. So I think maybe I came on the scene at +6. I'm not sure, in the 80s, 88. But do you, who have seen tape formulations through a longer period of time, was there a tape formulation that sounded better than the most recent +9? Did you like +3, +6, 0? Is there something about older tape formulations that you think were more musical, or they got better as we went on?
You know what? We were always just trying to fight, because by then, of course, you're in a multi-track recording. Mm-hmm. It was more about noise reduction.
So you never wanted like, I kind of missed the sound of +0 tape.
No.
Okay.
No, not really. I think I always, our multi-tracks, I think it was kind of like, +3 and then +5. I don't think we never got higher than +9.
Right. I don't think they got higher than +9, right?
Yeah.
That was the end.
As I ever went,
And what we're talking about, everybody, is they eventually got the tape formulation better so that it could hold more audio level. And the more audio level there was a constant, which was tape hiss. And the way to reduce tape hiss, the only way was to add more level, because then you could just say, hey, we're 9 dB above where we used to be. So now, theoretically, the tape hiss is 9 dB lower. So that's what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
Did you use Dolby A and Dolby SR? Those had such a sound to them. Mm-hmm. Did you like the sound of Dolby A and Dolby SR?
You know, I never used Dolby, but I did use DBX.
What was theirs?
There's it was just the counterpoint. It was exactly, they did the same function as Dolby, except they just used a different approach to it.
And did you like the consequence of the Dolby noise reduction on the audio?
You know what? I was okay with it.
Yeah.
It added a sort of not a high-end distortion, but there was a little a high-end sizzle that it definitely did add. It did not make your record duller, that's for sure.
Right.
And oddly enough, there were some guys that would, you encode with Dolby and then you don't decode it.
Right.
You actually use the stretched out sound
to
get a bit of like crazy sizzle.
Right.
You know?
So
it was kind of doing the vocal exciter treatment before there was a vocal exciter. You know,
for reference for our people, what they used to do with Dolby was like a pre-emphasis, meaning they would crank the high end on a signal. It wasn't all they did. Part of the process was just putting more high end and then reducing the high end later. And by the same quality, when you reduce the high end and bring it back to where zero should have been, so theoretically your high end would be the same, you would have brought down the tape hiss, which lived in the upper frequencies.
Correct.
But folks started using it as a sound. I noticed with Dolby A that it had this interesting attribute that it sounded different over time. So like the front end of your wave was bright, but then it kind of ducked a lot of the harshness out, you know? So it wasn't the same for my ears. It was kind of a cool little gag. In fact, when we did an Emmylou Harris record, we brought in Dolby A. We had to go all over the country to find 24 tracks of Dolby A and fly them in to Nashville to make this record. But we did it with Dolby A to use it kind of almost like a foot pedal. And it was trying to keep them working and getting 24 channels to work. But it was a cool little system and a cool little trick that a lot of guys would use to really get a sound on a record that was very unique.
Yeah. Yeah.
We've got so much to talk to you about. Are we at your studio? Is this the Blue Room?
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
Okay. And this is in Berry Hill. This is where you do all your records out of.
Uh-huh.
And tell us a little bit about that room. What kind of console do you have in there? I know you have Radar and Pro Tools.
Yeah, it's an old Trident TM series. It's the one right before the A range, and it's just the mic throughs are just wonderful. And I have a brilliant young engineer that works with me, Charles Yingling, and talk about Band-Aids and duct tape and chewing gum to keep it going. That's about it. But
are you able to tilt your iPad or your laptop down just a little bit so it can maybe be in view behind you, or is that? I don't know how locked off you are.
Hey, is that better? You can.
No,
see
can you just the angle is pointed up towards the monitor on the ceiling.
Well, I may never get it back to where it'll work, but okay,
That's
I'm
all right.
trying it. If I drop it, how we doing?
You go point down. We can see the top of the console. Down. There you go.
Yeah.
Oh, dude.
How about that?
Total beauty queen. Go down a little bit more. Wow.
Nice.
Gorgeous console.
Yeah, it's wicked. Now get it back to where we can talk.
And you're working on Radar, huh?
Yeah, I love I was an absolute stick in the mud about digital recording. I had sort of been forced into use it a couple times just from the artists I was working with. I was doing a record on Kenny Rogers, and there were multiple producers on it, and everybody was using digital, which I didn't particularly really like the sound of those records back then. So anyway, I had to bring in, I guess it was a Mitsubishi, and while we were cutting the tracks and everything, I said, well, I don't know. I think I might have been missing a boat here. I said, this didn't sound all that bad, And then I had recorded somehow I had recorded one of the tunes on analog. I think I did 2 or 3 songs in that album. And so anyway, it came time for mixing, and I think I did the analog song first. And, you know, it didn't take long, and it was Kenny was great, and the song was a good song, and everybody played great. So it all fell together real easy. So then we switched over, and I put up the one that was on the Mitsubishi, and I just kept fighting it. And I said, God, I mean, where's the depth? I can't, it's either here or it's nothing. I mean, where is, and it was driving me crazy. And I asked my assistant engineer at the time, I said, am I going crazy, or can I just, is this thing just sound like it's all or nothing up here? And I think he sort of was patronizing me a bit. And, oh yeah, Brent, I think it's not quite, it ain't analog, you know? So anyway, I used it then, and that was it. I just stuck, with our machine or Atari that we had that I just loved for years. And I remember doing a panel, oh my God, with Massenberger and Kyle Lenning and a real famous engineer from LA that did all the Cosby Stills, National Young records. What's his name? Super great guy. Anyway, we were all talking about digital recording. And I said, guys, I don't know who invited me on this panel, but I'm not probably the right guy to be here. And so at the end of the day, I said, you know what, man? Every one of you, every single one of you has said at least once today on this panel that it's almost as good as analog. I said, well, I'll tell you, I'm in the business of making records for my clients. I'm a producer now more than an engineer. And I've got to do the best for my artist and for me as a producer. And I've got my engineering cap is now on the back burner. All right. And I know you guys are all about pushing everything forward, which God bless you. It needs to get pushed forward. But I'm letting you guys do the pushing. You guys are going to do the heavy lifting. And when you tell me that this is as good or better than analog, I am all in. Until then, I'm going to be the lackey and let you guys do all this forward thinking and make the records you want to make. And I will sweep up the crumbs once you guys get done and benefit from all of your hard work.
Yeah, let them beta test it.
They all looked at me and said, "Oh, you are such a jerk." And I said, "I know it." And but I mean, we're all very good friends. But it was the truth. I said, I'm not the guy. It needs to be done, and there's wonderful things about it. It is the future, but I can't. Maybe it's my own ego. I cannot sacrifice. I cannot, in full conscience, make the best sounding record I can make when I can't do it if I'm in this realm right now. Mm. And I'll go to bed thinking, shit, if I'd have cut this thing analog, it'd have been a better record. Not that anybody may have known, but I would have known. And so I was a bit of a stick in the mud on that. And that never changed until one of the guys, I can't remember who it was, but it was representing Radar. And I had a session booked. It was a demo session for a publishing company. And I had all the great players, and I had Chad Cromwell on drums and oh God, Tim Lauer and all great players. And the guys said, you know what, just let me bring it in and I'll set it up. And if you don't like it, we'll just I can tear it down in 3 or 4 minutes and you'll get right back to your Atari. And I went, okay. And so he set it up and I liked the look of it, kind of looked like it was an analog machine, all the little, fast forwards and everything. And we cut one track and I had everybody come in and listen to a playback. And I just went, well, just leave it here. I'm in. He said, well, Brent, this is what I've been, touting around and everything. And I said, I don't care. Just leave it here. Or if you want to replace it, you can. But I'm in. Done. I'm convinced. I said, this is an absolute mirror image to my bus.
Wow. And
analog is never that. Nobody could ever look you in the eye and tell you that with an analog playback, that it is a mirror image of the bus. It isn't, because tape has a real coloration, especially on the bottom end. There's always a puffiness that people like, and there's always like, oh, analog got a bigger, tougher, bigger bottom. Well, it is true, but it's not what you were going for here, And so, and sometimes I liked it, and sometimes it kind of bothered me because I would get so meticulous on a certain sound, especially like on maybe the kick drum or the snare or the bass. And when you have a playback, it's just, there's a dB and a half
right
boost there,
Right.
And so, and then of course, 24 hours later, you have tape sag to deal with.
Right.
And of course, I spent a couple of years making records, and Bill Porter sort of neglected to tell me about tape sag.
Yeah. Tell us what tape sag is. Explain it to our listeners.
Tape sag is basically, once you've magnetized your tape through a recording, the most simplistic way to explain that is your molecules have gone from here in a virgin state out to here. They've been energized. And now they're sparkly, the cymbals, top of the snare, the sibilance of the vocal, everything that you want is out here in all of its beautiful glory for about 24 hours. After 24 hours, these little babies want to, they want to come back home. Now they don't get there, but from here, they get to about here.
Right.
And so
gets darker and
the next day,
a little more lethargic.
Myself going to the console and wanting to kick in like a little shelf from like 12K on up.
Right.
And finally I told Bill one day, I said, man, Bill, why is it every morning that I come in, I always want to like goose up, the top end a little bit. I said, am I monitoring just like way too damn loud? Or he said, oh, Brent, I'd never explained tape sag to you. I said, tape sag? What's that? And so he explained it to me. He said, no, it's normal. He said that if you don't like what this is, which sometimes it's good, but if there are certain things like the top of an acoustic guitar or a hi-hat or top end of a vocal, the air you think you're missing or strings or whatever, just put that little shelf in and you're back home. And I went, well, thank you. So anyway, with obviously that was an issue, and with digital, it's not.
Right. And how do you make your records that you're so analog, right? You were analog committed. What differences do you see in compensation now that you're on Radar? Are you doing anything different than had you made that record on the full analog version?
No, not at all.
Wow. So it's not like you have to deal with any spike peaks, transients that are, it feels the same. Is there a soft clipper on that Radar? Is there something that's acting like a...
I think there is, Joe. I think they've got something going on there. And Charles and I have talked about that a wee bit. And there is something in that circuitry to where the reason it sounds so much like the most perfect analog machine ever made is they have got something going on there. Because you don't see, like, when we get tapes in, and I don't deal with it much, but Charles, will mix here quite a bit with things that are cut, 100% digital, through a digital console or, home projects that are going straight through digital mic pre's straight into Pro Tools and stuff like that. And the levels are so hot that first of all, you got to bring the levels down, probably, 8 to 10 dB. And then the spikes that you see are way, way more than what we ever see, going through a radar system. So whatever they're doing, they've got something going on there.
Are there plenty of parts available for you to keep that radar machine maintained, or do you have a bunch of them in a back room that you get off eBay, or how do you deal with that?
We actually have two, and we can get it. Every once in a while, they'll pop up, and they're not terribly expensive. And when they pop up, we buy them.
It's 24 channels, right, of recording?
Yeah, 24 channels, yeah.
That's kind of nice, too, because it doesn't send you into option worlds where you're going to print 10 versions of a guitar track with all discrete microphones put all over the place. You're still held to accountability.
And then what we have, too, we have ways like when we're tracking, and this is a small room, by the way. Our room here is comfortable with like 4 people, like 5 maybe. And everybody's got a comfort zone there. And so it's not like we're trying to record 7 or 8 people at one time. I guess the point being is rarely on a track session do we need more than 24 tracks.
Yeah.
And so sometimes we will just we just live while we're tracking in radar. We just stay there. And then when the tracking's done, then we'll dump it all into Pro Tools. And then we're living in the modern world of infinity and options upon options.
And you find that because the converters are from the radar, that file has all the attributes that you like, and it's fine to be played back on Pro Tools.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
And so you won't use...
And Charles has a way of linking the Pro Tools system together with radar while we're tracking, and there's no latency.
Mm-hmm. And
how he does that, I absolutely have no earthly idea. But he's figured that out. Of course, he's got a degree in computer science from Oklahoma University, so he's got a wee bit more going on than just a good ear. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
He's a bit of a brainiac.
And how are you? You happy just letting the engineering go to another person in the room at this point? I mean, I guess you hire someone that has your sensibility and is going to honor what the sounds are that you're looking for. So at the end of the day, you don't care who gets them, right? It's not like you feel compelled to intervene.
It's a thing that we do together, like the nuts and bolts of it. Charles takes care of. Now, from miking, I still do that. I mean, we do that together. Like, I love miking. I love walking into the studio and miking stuff. Oddly enough, I love cleaning up the studio. I don't leave the studio.
Come over to my place.
But I do. No, there's something. I love coiling cables.
Me too. We were just doing this at the studio.
I love flipping the cables just right,
Over, under, right? That's the method you use?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. It's like watching a cowboy do a lasso, whenever you watch somebody can really roll cables good. It is very cathartic. It's like you could replace your morning yoga with wrapping cables and probably be in a pretty good place.
You're absolutely right. And so anyway, but a lot of the sounds I'm still connected with here.
Yeah.
And in the mixing, I'm sort of like I guess I consider myself a balance engineer now. In English terms, they would have like the recording engineers, and then they would have the balance engineers. I guess I'm sort of like that. And for a while, it would be difficult for me as a producer to make decisions musically if I didn't have my hands on the console. Mm-hmm. And that's not necessarily a good thing. That was like, well, I don't know why I can't sit back here and observe and listen and make a decision. Why do I have to be sitting here? And so I've been working on that because Charles is a great mixer. And I'm getting to where, I'm not 100% there yet, but I'm getting there to where I could say, Charles, do this. Mm-hmm. And And I'm getting to where I can leave the room and come in and go, God, I love that. But let's do something with the vocal here. Or maybe I'd love to have that little guitar part up just a wee bit. Other than that, perfect.
Hey, and by the way,
I'm getting to where I can do that.
By the way, what you said about being a balance engineer, right? Maybe one of the most underrated secret weapons of being a great mix engineer is actually the mixture that you're using on your faders. You may think you need to EQ something, and the reality is you just need to turn it down. If you turn something up, the louder you turn it up, the brighter it's going to appear. Mm-hmm. You may have the EQ just perfect. It might just need to be tucked down into the mix. People do not pay attention. They pay attention to buying every plugin on the planet, but the real masters that I've been able to sit behind, and watch them work, thanks for the Petty being one of them, I was blown away at his attention to detail of precise fader positions of every nuance.
That's everything.
Makes a record.
Yeah, that's everything.
Seems so obvious, but we get lost in all the technology where we're distracted, and there's this flashing light that's saying, just get the levels right on the faders first before you start over EQing something.
Yeah.
Something's down too low. You may need to put more high end into it so that frequency cuts through. But it's like, get the level first. Don't do the EQ.
Yeah,
and that's
create the distance. Like when I mixed, and I've always done this, even before I was an engineer, and just being a musician and playing in bands and listening to music incessantly. When I listened to my LPs, I would always listen visually. I would put myself in a room, and I would, even though I've been in the studio, and I don't think I'd ever actually seen one, but I guess I just sort of maybe just thought about what they would look like, but especially listening to the impressions, those great records made in Chicago on OK Records, Curtis Mayfield and, Major Lance and all those kind of records, and even rock records or stuff coming out of the Sun Studios when I was a kid. I would like try to figure out where Elvis was at, or I would figure out where the muted trumpets were. They got to be tucked over there. Mm. And I would always listen with my eyes, so to speak. And I do that today. Like when I'm listening, even on the records that I make, I'm listening with my eyes, as much as anything, especially if I'm putting this record in another place. In other words, if the record that I'm making, let's say on Gareth Dunlop, I'm putting that in High Studios in Memphis. In my mind, I'm not here in the Blue Room.
Yeah.
I
imagining another reality
at Willie Mitchell Studio.
Yeah.
That's where I'm at.
Well, that's what it takes to be a great creator, is a vision. You don't just, for a long time ago, I took my percussion box and hid it at my studio. If you own a recording studio with a box full of percussion gear, you will have vibroslap on records that shouldn't have vibroslap, right? Because people were searching, whatever. Let me grab that shaker. Let me grab that tambourine. Hey, what if I did this little frog with the aguero on the back, If you don't see it, hear it, and have vision for what it should be, a lot of times you're just stumbling around in the dark and you put a bunch of horrible crap on your records. It takes vision like that, picturing what that is and imagining it. You see it, and then you have a punch list of what you got to do. That's a true creator. Yeah. And we haven't even gone into, we have dug deep. While we talked a lot about Tina Turner, we're really talking about you as an engineer and your philosophy of how you hear sound. And as a producer, those things are interchangeable. At a certain point, after so many years of engineering, you become a producer, whether you called it on the record or not, if you're a good one. But it's like you've got a whole lineage of songwriter. We could spend another hour, and I'd love to have you, if you're up for it, we'd love to do a series where we do something on you as your songwriting career. It's something on you as you're producing an engineering career. Maybe this one is that. But it's impossible to talk about. I find on YouTube, it's impossible to have conversations that are so broad I find that people really want to know about Proud Mary and your philosophy of how you hear sound and the risks you tried on that and how you mix and how you see things, you know? But I do want to ask you before we leave.
Yeah.
I want to ask, what you did Elvis's last record.
Yeah.
Now, at this point, Elvis is Elvis. You're not working with the young upstart Elvis, who's like, this guy is doing, he's just starting to gyrate and do a movie, is a GI.
I would have loved that. I would have loved that. That's what my boss did. Bill Porter engineered those records.
Well, you got Elvis at the very end, which I'm sure was the most. You probably had to navigate a lot of logistics with management and people dealing with him being massive Elvis. Tell us a little bit about the Elvis record and what it was like to work on it.
All right. This is a fun story. I recorded and mixed Elvis's last number one, Way Down, and the B-side, Pledge of My Love, went number one too, I think. And I never met him. I never shook his hand.
Oh, wow.
What happened is Felton Jarvis, the producer, at that time, this studio that I was working in was Creative Workshop. And I helped build that with Buzz Cason, who was my first client, who wrote Everlasting Love and produced that record, which was my first hit as an engineer, was Everlasting Love. And anyway, I had been gone in Vegas for 7 years. And then that scene changed. And I moved back to Nashville, worked with Buzz, and we built Creative Workshop, which was the first Westlake audio room in Nashville, which was a big, big deal. And between Creative Workshop and Quad and maybe Woodland, those were the three hottest studios in town. And so Elvis had made the decision that he would come back to Nashville and record, because he hadn't been in a studio in years and hadn't been to Nashville in God knows how long. Felton Jarvis, okay, I'm going to check the studios out and see where I think Elvis might dig working. And when he came in and I met Felton, he figured, man, Elvis would love this place. This is it. And I went, God, that's so great. I can't wait, So anyway, we had 2 weeks blocked in the studio, and we had his band, which was Ronnie Tutt on drums, Jerry Sheff, bass, Glenn D. Harden on piano, James Burton on guitar. And then we had some Nashville guys, David Briggs, Tony Brown hanging out, Chip Young hanging out. We had the singers, we had the Stamps hanging out. It was like 20 people hanging out, depending on what song they was going to record. And there was about 6 or 7 songs that Elvis had signed off on. And so we came in the day before, and no Elvis, but we got sounds on everybody. And it was what we took all day. It was just great. It didn't take that long, but we just recorded some things and had some fun. And so next day is session day. And I think we weren't going to start till like maybe 6 o'clock or something like that. So everybody comes in like a couple hours early. We redo everything we did the day before, double check the drums, double check this. I actually had a singer sing on Elvis's mic one of the songs we were going to do. And I had the compression set. I had the earphones set. Verb in the earphones. All you had to do was walk in, say, I want to do this song, and boom, off to the races. And all the musicians loved everything. They were just like, God, Brent, this is a great studio, and blah, blah, blah. And I'm on cloud friggin' 9. Because when I was a little boy, Elvis Presley, Chuck Berry, Fats Domino, the Everlys, Buddy Holly, and Elvis probably maybe on top. Perkins, Carl Perkins, of course. So, I just thrilled beyond belief. So anyway, Felton says, well, I'm going to go back to the hotel and get Elvis. He leaves. He's gone for a couple hours. Comes back. He said, he'll be right behind me. We wait for an hour, and Felton says, I need to go back to the hotel. Goes back to the hotel. Comes back an hour, says, he'll be right behind me. This goes on till about 4 a.m. Finally, he says, cash it in. He doesn't want to work today. Be back tomorrow, 6 o'clock. This goes on for 3 days. 3 days of Felton going back to the hotel, hanging out with Elvis, coming back, saying Elvis is right behind him. Well, the last time he says, Elvis is right behind me. I saw him get in the car. He just missed the stoplight on Thompson Lane. So he'll be here in 3 minutes. We're all psyched. Well, actually, what Elvis did, when the light turned green, he turned right and went to the airport and back to Memphis. We've been there all that time. And of course, Felton is burning money like it's water, right? All these guys are triple scale players. And, you know, and we're not working for free at the studio, even though we're not working. So anyway, Felton is crushed, turns everybody loose and says, what are you doing tomorrow? And I said, well, I don't know. He said, well, I still got you, right? I said, yeah, you got me for the next week, but you know, you really don't. I mean, we're not going to bill you. You know, I mean, kind of heartbroken, but we're not going to bill you, you know, first, you know, that stuff. So anyway, he said, no, I'll find something to do. So he comes back and he said, I got 3 tapes, multi-track tapes, 16 track, that were cut at Graceland. And while the guys were rehearsing in the jungle room, everybody in this small room, and Elvis is walking around with a handheld mic, a 57, and we're rehearsing the songs. Can we listen to those? And I said, well, yeah. And they had the RCA remote truck there recording everything. And so we go through, well, it was more than that, 3 or 4 multi-track tapes. And we found 2 songs was did probably 3 or 4 times, but none of them a complete recording, to where he would start, then all of a sudden need to start talking in the middle of it, and then kick back into it again, and then finally have an ending. So out of those tapes, on the song was Way Down, I put together the song out of about 4 different takes. Of course, there's no clip tracks, nothing like that. So it's just the guys, of course, tribute to Ronnie Tutt, right? The drummer. And so anyway, I spliced together a drum track. And from that, we added, no. I spliced together a vocal. I spliced together a Elvis vocal with no other instruments. And then we went back and added the bass and the drums, and then the piano and the guitars, voices, everything. But the tough part was Elvis's vocal, he was walking around in the room with the guys. I mean, he would be like, he'd walk up to Ronnie and be as close as, 4 feet away. And, giving the shake to Ronnie. And then walk over to the bass player or wherever he was walking around. I have no idea, but he was walking around the room. And so all of the bleed in his mic was like, anytime he wasn't singing, it was just like a whole second band would appear. And so while we're recording, it wasn't so bothersome because I would have just enough of Elvis's voice in there to where guys could play, correct? But when it came time to mixing, you can't have Elvis's voice tucked behind the kick. You got to have the guy up there. Now that was a challenge. There again, no automation. And so what I would do, I mix that song like a half a verse at a time. And then I would just stop because I just couldn't go quick enough to get between lines where you would hear the ghost band, so to speak.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so finally I just said, you know what? If I just mix 6 bars or 8 bars, done. I'll put some leader tape in on the the 1/4-inch tape, 2-track.
Yeah. And then edit it
Then
together.
I'll just continue on. Well, when the multi-track would go by, it was just like a blur of splicing tape. When the quarter inch would go by, it was just like a double blur, because there were just so many edits in it.
This is like total Pro Tools without Pro Tools.
Oh, well, no, yeah, totally. And so finally I get through it. And of course, I'm totally by myself. Felton was never there for any of this. Well, he was for the vocal, for putting the vocal together, he was there, but not for the mixing. And so when he came in and listened to it, I was just embarrassed to even play it. But I played it and he said, it's perfect. It's great. And I'm sitting there thinking, do you have any idea what great is? This ain't it. And so anyway.
So can you hear that all through that recording? If we go listen to those recordings, will we hear the Phantom band coming up in his vocal mic?
No, of course not. Because after every breath that he would take, if he wasn't singing, I would duck that fader.
Wow, I got to go check it. What's the titles of those songs?
Way Down.
Way Down.
Yeah, and it's actually, I did an interview for an English magazine about a year ago. And it was, I can't think of the name of it, but actually I may have a copy of it in the next room. But an interview with Brent Maher about Elvis's last #1. And I tell the story. And he said, Brent, all of us aficionados think that's probably the best sounded record that Elvis made during the 70s. And so the funny thing is, Joe, is in my mind, my boss, Bill Porter, recorded some of the best selling ever records there ever was. And here I'm his protege. And in my mind, I have made the absolute worst sounding record that Elvis made. It was still a #1 record, came out and flew up the charts. Well, I would get in my car, turn on the radio, and sure as heck, it'd be way down. I couldn't turn it off quick enough because I was so embarrassed with the sound.
You knew how the sausage was made.
Yeah. So anyway, 25, 30 years later, I'm in Colorado on vacation. My wife and I are out there. And we were in this little leather store. And she had bought like a little purse or something like that. And they had just re-released this Elvis 30 #1s or something like this. And Janelle's paying for her stuff. And I'm listening to like All Shook Up and Heartbreak and, Money Honey and some of these great songs and saying, oh, Jesus, Elvis. Oh, my God. Oh, love Elvis. And all of a sudden this song comes up and I'm going, all right. Okay. Yeah. Now I'm like, Jesus, Lord. That's the one I did.
How cool is that?
It's not bad. It's not that terrible. And so I went up to Janelle and I took her by the shoulder. I said, look, sweetheart, this isn't a piece of shit. It's actually really good. Listen to it. And the dude checking her out was this big bald guy with like tattoos on his neck and everything. He looked at me and said, dude, this is Elvis. This is the king. This ain't shit. And I went, I'm sorry, man. I said, I totally apologize. Absolutely. And I wasn't going to, there's no way I could explain to him, I actually made this record and blah, 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 blah. I just let sleeping dogs lie. But anyway, I was so happy.
Yeah.
And now when I listen to that record, I'd say, well, it's a good sounding record.
I'm going to go listen to it right after this podcast. Okay. As you were talking, I heard myself go, wow. And I thought, this is like the ultimate for producer engineer nerds. This is like the equivalent of like 8 people gathered around like a stone-lined fire roasting marshmallows and dude is telling stories. Like this is like the ultimate hang for people that love this stuff, this little nuancy stuff of how these records and your perception of a record like that. It's just like, it leaves you speechless. I'm usually always interrupting people with the next question. And It's like with you, it's just like, I forget that I'm even in the interview. Thank you so much for coming on and spending some time. Once again, this is one sliver into into Brent Maher's creative life. This is one, if you were to zoom in like on Google Maps from outer space and look at Franklin, Tennessee, this is that story. And you'd have to zoom out to see the total influence he's had on the music world. You know, we didn't even get involved with the production situation and 10 records with the Judds and you being responsible for discovering them and changing the course and sound of country music. And all the other genre stuff you do, like Johnny Langer, not Johnny Lang. Is it Johnny Lang?
Well, John Reed. Well, I love that we could talk about Duke Ellington too. I engineered
yes
before he passed away.
I mean,
but, if you want to do this again, Joe,
we would love to have you back on and focus in. Like, I think it's more digestible for us to do specific little statements like this. So maybe we could do this about production and songwriting. You know, and the way you develop some of those records. And although we covered quite a bit of the production in this, you know, I think that if you have it in you, man, it's I'd love to talk to you on or off camera. So appreciate you coming on. You are a legend that's still rocking the records I hear you doing. I'm still envious of them. I'd like to sit in on some of these records while you're mixing and watch your work. So if you'd let me do that, I would love to do that.
Well, absolutely.
Well, thank you for your time and for all the great music and all the, you know, you set the bar really high for the rest of us. Thank you for being you and being stellar. And I don't think Mike Shimshack said a single thing this entire episode.
I know. Where's my mic?
There's a gate issue on my Joe and I have to figure out so it's like I'll talk and nothing. You guys don't hear me. So
it's like you're from the space shuttle. You know, like you get that gargly first 3.5 seconds. So. We're going to get that figured out so we can hear more of Mike because Mike is he's the color commentator of this group.
Well, next time we get together too, maybe we can be in the same room. You know, I've got my shots, and maybe you guys can get yours. And
yeah, I'm on a list to get mine. I know Mikey got. You get the first one, or you get the second one? Where you at, Mikey?
I got the first one. The second one should be next week or two.
Oh man! Well, then next time we do this, let's be together.
Yeah,
great.
I've got to get I'm on a list. I have type 2 diabetes. So, like, I guess I could get further up a list, but I almost feel guilty. It's like, I think I can wait, you know? So I've been kind of waiting to let other people get the shot, thinking like, I don't want to jump the line, but I need to get in there.
You get your shot.
Yeah, right. I mean, I guess I can do that. I mean, it'd be the equivalent of getting up to give your seat to somebody on the bus. You know, you feel like, oh, you're doing the right thing, but I think it's still the right thing. I'm going to go and get on a list and get a shot.
Do it.
Well, thank you. And it's great to have you on, man. It's truly a fan of your philosophy. And the records you make from that philosophy are like, for me, I really envy them. They aren't not my sensibility. I can't do it. Like I told you, I'm not capable, but I envy after them. And it's like, I will, if you let me come and sit behind you while you're finishing up a record, you know, if there's nobody in the room that, you know, I'd be bothering, I'd love to watch you finish out something and maybe even bring up a camera if you'd let me.
Well, you know, maybe on our next thing that we do together, like I'm right in the middle of finishing a Taj Mahal record.
Oh, nice.
And so it would be fun to play maybe bits and pieces of like a Taj record. And then I can also play you a song that I wrote for Tina Turner that we recorded back in 73, and all the master tapes were destroyed in a fire. And I've got the only version of that song that I've resurrected that we could listen.
I remember being over at Near Z's house for barbecue, and you took me and Near Z and maybe one other person, Mike Shimshack, out to your car, and you played it for us. And I just left that car thinking like what just happened? What did I just, you know, it was like an amazing experience. I would love to do that.
Listen to, yeah.
Incredible. Well, you're a piece of music history. The other thing that we kind of talk to people, I guess, how do you realize the levity of just the Proud Mary thing? Such an iconic song on the level of like Stairway to Heaven, right? It's an iconic piece of music. Does that ever do you ever look back and say, oh my God, I was a part of that? Like, is that, how do you metabolize that level of being associated with something that big?
Yeah, I do. I think about how fortunate, how using the word blessed, how just to have had the opportunities to be in a room where something was created with musicians that are just caught up in a great moment and are bringing a song to life and everything. And you somehow were lucky enough to be the person that sat behind the console and made this thing happen as far as what your job was. I think about that a lot. And all I can say is I just feel unbelievably grateful would be the word to have been in the presence of Ike and Tina and some of the other great artists I've worked with, just to be able to sit 3 feet away from Ray Charles and 3 feet away from Duke Ellington and Bobby Darin, one of my biggest heroes, and let alone Merle and Willie and Orbison, and just to say I've just been in a room with these men and women, Dolly. It's nothing but just being incredibly grateful.
What a career. Congratulations. And you're such a cool dude. After all of it, people could turn into crazy people after having that story to tell, feeling like for one reason or another that they are, have ascended to another level. You don't come off that way. So thank you for being that dude. Do you have any place that people can find you, like a website or social media accounts?
I'm so awful about that. I'm not on Facebook. I don't do Twitter. I was on Facebook for 15 minutes and I got real uncomfortable about not wanting to say, yeah, I want to be friends with you because I don't know you. And I know that's not what it's all about. And I know I'm missing so much in the world, but I'm not. No, I'm just sort of me in my studio and my house.
Dude, that's the way to be. Thank you so much for coming on. And we hope to have you on again if you're willing. We'd love to do that. Thank you so much for listening. And we're signing off this week from the List Barn. We'll see you next time.